Coming up this week on the Digital Lifestyle Show 849, Garry and Richard are here. We'll be talking about Insteon and the smart home shutdown. What that's mean for smart home users and what happens when your smart home provider shuts down and you lose connection to your devices. We'll be talking about new Windows Insider builds. We'll be talking ZX Spectrum anniversary and lots more. So let's. Garry, Richard, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
And we're welcome back to the listeners as well because we took a week off last week.
Yeah.
It was Easter, so I thought we deserved a bit of a break. Look, there wasn't any news apart from a lot of news that there was.
Exactly, lots of things happened last week.
yeah. So we've got plenty to talk about. We've got new builds and there's some Spectrum stuff I wanted to ask you about, updates. But the thing I wanted to start with first is something that you guys mentioned to me last week was a topic that we've touched on before is what happens when your smart home things disappear. Well, it's actually really happened, doesn't it? And the Insteon products are no more.
Yeah.
For services.
Yeah, really bad actually. They've I mean, they did all kinds of things, didn't they? There was I think there was smart plugs and there's thermostats and things, lots of smart home accessories.
Yeah, and basically people had the whole infrastructure. Infrastructure based on Insteon,
and they basically turned the servers off, from what I can tell, or they turned the services off, and then suddenly all these things were rendered completely dumb. I mean, I think there is efforts to kind of provide a substitute, but I mean, Garry, you obviously know a lot more about this than I do, but I believe if any users who tried to do a factory reset were doubly screwed in that was it.
That actually was the main problem. If you had your automation set up locally, and you can still run stuff locally, but as soon as it touched the cloud, including when you do a full reset, you basically lost everything because it wasn't able to find the cloud and just completely died. And the problem here was basically they went bust. And their assets were sold off, and the people they sold it off to didn't want to keep it running. So, I mean, it's not quite bankruptcy because it's done slightly differently. There's some protection thing where basically the assets go over to a company which then tries to sell them off to other people, which actually does hold out some hope because there's a third party which uses Insteon and that has its own controller who's really interested in purchasing it, and whether that will go ahead, I don't know. But yeah, it is a cautionary tale. I mean, it's certainly all eggs in one basket potentially, and this really does affect our audience potentially because if you remember way back when there was a real partnership between Insteon and Microsoft for Windows, and a lot of people may have actually got Insteon products through that. So yeah, they used to sell Insteon products in the Microsoft stores in the States. Yeah, so I mean, it's a big thing, really, and it is something which you do wonder if there should be some regulatory body for smart home equipment in some ways.
Well, exactly. Yes,
I mean, cloud-based systems.
I mean, you kind of think like you have some sort of smart device version of Apto or something where at least where all the manufacturers chip in to ensure that that if any one of them goes bust or disappears, at least the customers won't be left completely high and dry as they appear to have been here. Although I mean, it had been going wrong for a while, hadn't it?
Yes, and the support had been dropping off, and basically they just ran out of money, which is a shame. And there's been a lot of venom spouted at the founders of Insteon, who, from my impression of talking to them a few times, were generally nice people, and who tried to do something very good for people. But it's challenging. I mean, certainly the whole smart home sales plummeted during the pandemic. You'd think in some ways they'd probably gone up, but they didn't. I guess people weren't out and about and seeing things and not getting inspired to automate their homes or just whatever. But I mean, and their costs were going up. Energy costs going
Garry,
up.
I mean, during lockdown, let's face it, getting up to turn it on and off the light was about the only exercise we got for a year.
So maybe that was it. People didn't want to use the smartphones, and I think that had a real big impact on them. They were struggling financially in that respect, and just ran out of money basically. What I think is bad is the fact that they didn't admit that leading up to the shut off. So people didn't have a chance to plan, to actually look at ways around it. And there are things you could have done to avoid. I mean, certainly getting the things running locally would have been an answer. I mean, as I say, there's some hope the third party might be there, but it is a cautionary tale, and I do think that we do need some way of protecting people from this. I mean, you actually think about this could be a safety issue. If depending how you should never really code things so that they fail nasty, but people could do control thermostats and pumps and water heaters with these things, and if for some reason they got locked on and you couldn't turn them off, which was happening in some people's cases, that could be pretty disastrous in a more permanent way than just losing your smart home control. So yeah, it's a worry, and I'm not all for regulation, but I think in this case there is something to be said for regulating.
Yes, I mean, I guess the problem is, as a business, you can't really, and unless you know you're being acquired, you can't really say, well, in 6 months' time, it's all going to go off, because then you've basically put your business, driven it into the ground already. So I can see how they had the issue from a business standpoint, but I think you're absolutely right. There does need to be some kind of regulation just to give customers some form of protection when this happens, because it's I mean, we kind of talk about when Amazon goes down, the whole world goes down, but this is quite bad for the people who bought these things, and I think reasonably expected them to last more than a few years.
Yeah, and also because it was a proprietary brand technology, and everything was in one box effectively, and all eggs in one basket, that they really get affected by it. Some people, I mean, like myself, if one part of my smart home went down, I probably could cover it with other bits. But it's I mean, there's people in the States whose whole houses just basically stopped working overnight, which isn't good.
No, that's a bad look.
I think this is where perhaps if there was more, if everybody was adopting the standard approach. If you think back, to the early days of X11, so you could have a X11 plug from one supplier, and a different X11 device light switch from a different supplier, and if you were mixing and matching them, then it wouldn't be so bad. So if you bought a hub that would work with any of the services, but because everything is siloed into separate services, then this is the exact issue, isn't it? If Philips Hue decided to switch off the server,
which they did,
yeah.
Gen 1 devices, so they actually did that.
Yeah. I know that it has local control as well, so perhaps that mitigates it a bit. But even so, I was like when I mentioned about that D-Link smart plug I use for my garden lights, that's been switched off, that plug, and I've got to replace it with another plug at some point. But I noticed it had the press, or the email that I got about it also mentioned baby monitors and things like that as well. So yeah, they're gone. There's no way around it. But if you're fully all in on a provider, then you really are. And that's what worries me a little bit about sort of heating ones, because that's quite an integral system in your home. And that's why I thought long and hard about using Hive, and it's part of British Gas, which I'm hoping that that service will stick around for a while. But if that goes away, then I've got to replace that with something else pretty quickly. Otherwise, I've just got a dumb heating system. You can still operate it manually, but if you were all in and went Insteon with everything, then you've got an expensive job now to replace everything, haven't you?
Yeah.
It's not like you can use their switch with another provider unless there's some some sort of hacky way that you can create a Raspberry Pi to emulate it or something like that. But it doesn't seem that's an easy thing to do.
No.
So maybe that's the regulation, that that all devices have a certain class of smart home. I guess the closest we get this is Google Home or Alexa, where you can have the devices at least link in with that. So I've got light switches and lights and plugs from different manufacturers, so I'm not all my eggs aren't in one basket.
Well, I mean, if you talk to people like Google and Amazon about this, they'll point you towards Matter, which is their sort of the standard they're all coming up with. Hence all the puns about why does it matter, but it does really matter that we have some consistency standard. But the problem is that even that's not really a standard. You can implement it in different ways, and people can still go proprietary with it, because there's too much protection needed by the industry to protect their own sales. There's actually, I mean, it's a disincentive to be generic. Being proprietary is incentivized in the way business runs at the moment and things. Unless there is regulation, unless you have standards, you have to adhere to. Businesses won't adhere to standards because you don't have to. I mean, if electricity was to start up again today, and it wasn't regulated, because nothing seems to get regulated these days, we'd have all different plugs in all different houses, which is actually what we had at the start.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah.
So yeah, it's really tricky, this sort of stuff.
And there doesn't seem to be there's not an easy solution, because I mean, if you think, even if you go with Google or Amazon and something, we've seen Google aren't shy about cancelling products either. So just because you go in there doesn't mean it's a guarantee.
No, not at all.
So go ahead.
I was just going to say, so I think the only solution is the one I've taken, which is to have multiple vendors and multiple solutions, so I can mix and match and have my own hub to control it effectively. Works.
Yeah, and I suppose that's a bit like I've got, where I've not got multiple hubs, but I've got multiple manufacturer devices all being controlled through the Amazon device. So and I've got another D-Link plug which is supported, so I've got to go and swap that out in my garage for my garden lights. But yeah, there isn't an easy solution for this, and just I think it's going to put a lot of people off going down that full smart home route, which I think it's a cautionary tale for everybody. And so what happens now with these Insteon devices? They're just going to wait and see if something comes out of it, and I guess at the moment these devices are just useless.
The rumor that this other company is interested in purchasing, which would actually probably, because they've got their own hub, and they could probably somehow get the service back up and running and transfer it across potentially. I mean, whatever happens, there's going to be a cost involved for these people, because nobody's going to do this for free. It's just they've got to. I mean, there was also talk about a group of Insteon owners looking at sort of doing a group purchase or some way of actually funding the service from the people, the equivalent of the liquidators, because it's not a liquidation. It's a strange stateside rule on how they do these financial matters. But so there is some hope. But the main thing to do at the moment is don't hard reset it.
No factory resets.
Don't do a reset, ever you do, and just try and keep it local to keep it running, and then reasonably okay for a little while at least.
Yeah. Oh well, it's a cautionary tale again, but you see these things throughout the industry, don't we? At various periods of time. I mean, if you look back at maybe into the early computing era, into the 80s, where you would have an Auric or a Jupiter Ace or something like that. You could invest in that, and they stopped making them. These manufacturers were popping up and then disappearing again quite frequently in that time, and eventually it settled down. So maybe it's something similar to that, but perhaps not quite as fast, a rapid startup and shutdown. But it's that kind of thing, and we have been burnt by these things. And if you were all in on your Jupiter Ace and you brought a load of peripherals for it, and that was the end of that line, and then you had to buy something else.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, thinking about the issues back then, I'd say maybe something like the Texas Instruments 9948, where you had a massive corporation pulling the plug very abruptly.
Yes.
Whereas the Jupiter Ace, coincidentally, I did actually listen to Steve Vickers and Richard Outwasser the weekend talking about Jupiter Ace, which of course is the thing that they went on to do after the ZX Spectrum. And I think it was Richard Outwasser said there was a market of about 300 machines for the Jupiter Ace. We filled that pretty quickly, and then that was it.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. It is more like the Texas Instruments pulling it, or even like Amiga. We talked about Commodore Amiga the other week, didn't we? You could have invested thousands on your Amiga stuff, and then they made the CD32, and then that was it, wasn't it? So yeah, maybe it's not a new thing in technology.
You're going to get emails for that. You're going to get emails for that.
Well, as we mentioned the other week, I love my my Amiga. I was very happy with my 1200 with an 80 gig hard drive in there. Yeah.
I mean, it's a really big compilation to do this as well. I mean, just look at the Apple Newton. That was a
yes.
overnight.
Yeah. Oh yes. I mean, Apple are past masters at yanking support. They'll support some things forever, but other things, like I have a 2012 Mac Mini, which is an Intel i7, works perfectly well. But the only thing I can run it now is Windows 10, because obviously you can't get updates anymore for Mac OS.
Yeah, it's the thing with technology; it's obsolescence. But it's when you would at least expect to get some lifespan out of your purchases.
And to be fair, you've also normally got some form of notice that it's happening. I think we're going to go back here again to the issue that it just suddenly happened to people, and they were left high and dry.
And even like with your TI 99 or your Amiga or your Apple Newton, they carried on working. Even your Microsoft Band carried on working.
They kept on working. And of course, there's a relatively thriving community, even sort of 30, 40 years on, that supports them. Which figures on to the ZX Spectrum.
Yes, the ZX Spectrum, big anniversary, 40 years. I can't believe it's 40 years. I'm obviously not old. I'm not old enough to have a Spectrum, of course.
Obviously not, no. And I'm sure Gary's got no idea what we're talking about.
Never heard of it.
But that's probably more because he's forgotten than anything else. Did he use punch tape? No.
Yeah, Gary's not interested in these newfangled machines.
Mr. Whittaker, it doesn't use punch tape.
Punch cards. Can I patch them? You can get tape out.
Yes, it was the 40th anniversary. I think it's the 23rd of April, wasn't it? Last weekend was the big 4.0 for the Sinclair ZX Spectrum, which is the when it was launched at I think was it the Personal Computer World Show at Earls Court? I think that they launched it there.
Yeah.
And it was a follow up to the ZX 81. Makes you kind of realise just how quickly these things happen, because we had the 81 the year before, and then the ZX Spectrum, which was a massive leap forward really, because it had colour and it's high resolution graphics and that marvelous color clash issue as well. So I had a great weekend. I went to the National Museum of Computing and also the Centre for Computing History in Bletchley Park and Cambridge, respectively. Places we went to, I think last year, wasn't it?
Yes, it was our summer. Yeah, it was last year. Summer road trip.
A little road trip. So I went back because the National Museum of Computing at Bletchley Park, which is a place where they got all this sort of the stuff from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. They've also got the computers from the 80s as well, which we talked about, and they'd managed to get in really some quite big names from ZX Spectrum history. They got in Dr. Steve Vickers, who I think he was contracted by Nine Tiles Software, I think, to do the firmware, the ROM. So kind of a lot of the basic stuff was him. And Richard Altwasser, who worked on the hardware. So kind of you had to do all the shuffling around designs and things to kind of fit everything into the hardware, work out what he could give and take, because one thing he did say during his Q&A session was, of course, they were building very much to a price point. So they knew how to do things like high-res graphics and sprites and things, but they also had to hit the £125 price, which, relatively speaking, that's what, about £350 today, I think. So that's quite a lot. But back then there was nothing like it, was there? It was just wow, that's so cheap compared to what else was around at the time.
Yeah, the BBC Micro was pushing £400, wasn't it, at the time?
Exactly, yeah. And so they also got Crispin Sinclair in as well. Sir Clive Sinclair's son. Obviously, Sir Clive sadly is no longer with us, nor is I think Rick Dickinson, the chap who designed the actual shape of the Spectrum. He's also passed away recently as well. It was fascinating. The war stories, from designing it to plugging it at to launching it at the show. And of course, both Steve Vickers and Richard Altwasser went on another path after the Spectrum launch, and Sinclair itself did the QL. But the Spectrum, it's hard to really underestimate just the colossal impact that machine had, because it just they sold millions and millions of these devices, and almost every Christmas tree had a ZX Spectrum underneath it, because it was suddenly affordable. as did you, yeah. So the National Museum of Computing, they had obviously the Q&As with those people, which I have to say was fascinating. I'm not sure if they're going to put them up as recordings. I know they did a live Zoom while it was happening, so I presume there's a recording somewhere. It was superb. It was very, very interesting. I mean, there's clearly still a bit of niggling, a bit of, I wouldn't say bitterness, but a bit of, annoyance about what happened with the whole BBC Micro situation, because as you probably remember at the time, the BBC, the UK's Broadcasting Corporation, wanted to also promote computing in the home and learning good computing, and for a variety of reasons that we're not going to go into here, they chose to go down the Acorn route. So you had the situation where schools and things all had Acorn BBC Micros, but most homes had Spectrums because the Spectrum was so much cheaper.
Yeah, I think I'm sure I've told this story on the show before, but I had a Spectrum and handed my homework in once. Everybody else in the class did it on the big, dot matrix printers, and handed their homework in, and I did mine on my Sinclair printer.
The thermal printer.
Yeah, the thermal print, and the teacher held it up. It was a maths teacher, of course, because in computers it would be maths. Held it up like that and said, "Dixon, what's this?" A very unimpressed teacher, but I had a really enthusiastic. It was called Controlled Technology, the class, but it was an electronics teacher who had a ZX81 which he used, and ZX80 which he used with robotic arms, and that got me interested in computing. So somebody showed me some enthusiasm, and that set me down this path.
Exactly. I mean, it's you kind of look at the impact those machines had, certainly in the UK, because the UK became, I mean, it still is very, very much a coding powerhouse if you compare it to other countries in Europe. It had a colossal impact, I think, much more so than elsewhere. I mean, obviously in the US, you had the Commodores and things and the Apples, but I just think in the UK, the Spectrum just did so well. And I mean, one thing that I had forgotten completely, which Steve Vickers got out, was, of course, the programming manual that came with the Spectrum.
Oh, fantastic manual!
How good that book was, and that they were handing some out, and I had forgotten. Everything's in there. I mean, it's
every keyword,
how the machine works, how it reads in memory. It's wow. And one of the things he said was he was very careful when writing the manual to ensure that there were no sudden roadblocks halfway through. You could keep on going and just learning gradually as he went, without having to get to the point where you hit a massive brick wall, because you had to learn so much stuff before you could make anything happen. He said it's all about trying to make things happen along. He also made the point, actually I think it might be Richard Outfast that made the point, that we all laughed about the Spectrum's keyboard and the fact keywords and things would appear, but Richard Outfast made the point that these days you have things like Scratch, and that's how Scratch works. So it's very hard to actually write incorrect syntax, because there's no typos because the keywords are there. So it was brilliant. I have to say they had some games, Ian, which they had a games contest. There was Jetpack, Manic Miner, Horace Go Skiing, and I can confirm that I am as bad now as I was 40 years ago at all those games. Absolutely rubbish. So
fantastic.
So that was great. And then after that, I went on to the Centre for Computing History. Spoke to Jason Fitzpatrick. We both obviously remember from when we were there last. And I hadn't realised, Gary, I don't know if you saw, Ian and I spoke about this before the show. I hadn't realised how many Spectrum clones were out there and how many they had on display. Because hidden behind, in the cafeteria area, there's a glass cabinet full of Spectrum clones, either official ones, the Timex ones, or some gloriously wonderful ones from the former Soviet Union and things. Absolutely fantastic devices where someone's clearly done a straightforward copy and paste. And so they had one that was, you had a Timex machine that looked an awful lot like a TI-994. And it had the rubberized keyboard, but it had a big old cartridge port on the side as well. So that was fascinating. They had a machine from Brazil, which was actually ZX81 in a silver ZX Spectrum case. You had, as I said, this, a Spectrum Plus clone, which had just the most barking mad ports. The back had like two big DIN sockets, and then some joystick ports, I think, and then a mystery power socket in a hole and a reset button that looked like some person gone mad with a drill, although apparently that's how they were all made. And they I mean, again, I should point out that the Cambridge place, they were very careful with these. They were held with gloves on. I wasn't allowed to touch anything at all. It's just here they are, and just someone said we can't turn this one upside down to look at the base because if you do, the keys will fall out. Quality manufacturing there.
And it wasn't the Spectrum really big as well in the Spanish market as well, because that's where the Spectrum Plus came from there. And
They got a Spanish ones, one's made in Portugal, I think, or one's made in Brazil. Yeah. So again, they're all on display in a cabinet. I'd recommend going there and just checking them out.
Yeah.
Also, if you've got any interest in them, because we did mention the Jupiter race earlier on, which is what Steve Vickers and Richard Outvasser went on to do after the Spectrum. Unfortunately, it was a Forth-based computer, which didn't really take off, which is unfortunate because I like Forth personally, but I can see why it was a bit extreme. It was more of a, if you're a computer scientist, what would you build? I'd build one of those, even though I know that no one would ever buy it. Yeah. Whereas Clive, obviously, a great businessman.
One of my claims to fame is I actually interviewed at Jupiter.
Oh, did you? Well, there we go. During his brief life.
Yeah.
It wasn't there very long, was it? Unfortunately,
it wasn't. I don't think they were around by the time the second interview was actually due to be.
Oh, it's sad, but again, at the Centre for Computing History in Cambridge, they did say that if you contact them ahead of time, they'll normally get things out for you. If you want to see them, and if they can be turned on, they'll be turned on for you as well. So it's if there's a special thing you're particularly interested in, and their website's pretty detailed on their artifacts, they'll normally get things out for you. So it's I'd strongly recommend it. Really recommend it. They're actually. The Cambridge place, they're actually, I don't know if you remember from last year, they were doing the Web at 30 stuff. This time, they've now changed that exhibition into a history of computer games over the last 45 years, which runs every weekend in the Cambridge Grand Arcades. That's worthwhile attending. And I think in a few weeks' time, you have to check the website. I think they're also doing a 25 years of GoldenEye on the Nintendo.
Right, yeah.
Which should be very exciting.
Suppose people say it's one of the best Bond games ever made.
Well, yes, of course, and of course, I was enjoying playing Jetpack, and Jetpack was made by Ultimate, which obviously became Rare, did GoldenEye, and of course, Rare today does some of the biggest franchises in the world, games like Sea of Thieves and things. So it's interesting to see that history there. Even though I'm still rubbish at Jetpack.
Jetpack is it annoying? I played it not that long ago on the recreated Spectrum that I had, but it's incredibly infuriating game actually.
It is, but it's maddeningly addictive, isn't it? Because it's so easy to get into, and then it's I mean, they at the National Museum of Computing, they had the Spectrum Next there as well, which unfortunately wasn't running, but that was cool. So it does bring up the discussion of emulation versus actual hardware, because both the Bletchley Park place and the Cambridge place, and both said you can get most things for the Spectrum. You can even get the membranes if they go. You can even kick. Those are all viable. They can be done. Although if you end up bending your case when you open it, that's it. It's scrap. But most of the hardware is fixable, apart from the ULAs, the uncommitted logic, because that's a custom chip, and when they go, that's it. So the question then is, do you replace that with a FPGA, or do you, which then is it still the same hardware anymore? Has it changed? So there's enough Spectrum still working now at 40. The question is, will we see 50, maybe 60? It's going to depend, I think, on those ROM chips.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a few up there. Most of them work. Yeah, but it is. Every time I do power them up, I always think, is it this time?
Well, it's worthwhile finding out, because I know Jason was saying that he's a great believer in he called it exercising the computers. He says you just keep them turned on so the capacitors keep get charged up and things as it keeps running. So it's worthwhile finding things up every now and again to stop things drying out on the board. But obviously, there will come a point where they don't turn on anymore, and then we'll have to make a decision. But hopefully, that's a way away yet. But I had an absolutely fabulous time. So I'd recommend a visit to both those places, which I know we've said before. But brilliant.
Both excellent places. And
happy birthdays to the Spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing I wish I hadn't got rid of, which I did, was my little RAM music machine expansion pack that I got for the Spectrum, which I probably got in about 88, 89, which allowed 8-bit sampling, and you could actually do 4-track recording with it and MIDI as well. So you could actually use it as a music, a very early music studio. I don't think you could do recording. You could do sampling and MIDI. So you could use it. I mean, I know that people like Vince Clarke of Erasure did it all on a BBC Micro in the early days, but yeah, Spectrum had some good stuff as well. So yeah, brilliant. Well, I think anybody in the area should definitely check out the museums. They're both brilliant places to go, and we spent the time went very quickly. The time we spent down there, it was fantastic.
Exactly, yeah, it does go so fast, and of course they're all staffed by enthusiasts, so yeah, they're all very happy to talk to you at great length about the toys. So if there's anything in particular, it's always worthwhile just asking them up ahead of time, and you'd be surprised how many things they can put out storage for you to look at if you give enough notice.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, glad you enjoyed that trip. Now moving on to some slightly more updated stuff. We didn't record last week and we didn't get a build last week, but we did get one the week before, which we also got, which was an ISO for it as well. I don't know if you tried this out. This was 22598.
Oh, crikey, you're going back a while there. Yes.
Yeah, so that was back to the 13th of April. It was just after we recorded last week. I think it was.
Yep, and they also rolled out 2 cumulative updates to test the servicing pipeline. Again,
I know you love them.
I do love them. They're my favourite things.
Yeah, I always smile when I see they release those. But yeah, they did release 2 of those. So good news if you're in China with a Lenovo PC, you can now get these builds again.
Yes, of course. Yeah, they fixed it. I did actually try and find out what it was that stopped working, but they wouldn't tell me. I don't know if you know, Gary.
I do not know. No, I couldn't find out either. So it was obviously something they really wanted to keep secret.
It's some driver type thing, isn't it? Because they said you have to allow the Lenovo PC Manager to do an update, and then it works.
Yeah, I mean it is a weird one. I mean there was some speculation online as to what it was. I even asked both Lenovo and Microsoft directly. Was it to do with TPM, or because obviously you can't run TPM in China. You have to use the domestic module, but that wouldn't explain why, say, HP devices still work. So it's HP as an example. Hasten to add, not just thinking about HP out. So yeah, that was a weird one. But yes, the good news is whatever it was, it's been fixed. Hooray!
Yeah.
And so if you're a Windows insider in China using a Lenovo device, you could now get that servicing pipeline tested. Oh yes.
And the other things, there was only some minor things in it, really. There was just Windows Spotlight on the desktop by default now.
Yep.
If you could do a clean install.
And that there was also a fixes for with the Windows subsystem for Linux 2. There was issues with file system mounting on ARM64. So the 3 users using Windows and ARM would be happy with that.
Yeah, and there's some new keys, aren't there? Some Alt tabs and things like that in Task Manager. I seem to. Oh, there you go. Yeah, Alt N and Alt E and Alt V in Task Manager. Task Manager needs a bit of polishing, I think, before they're ready to go with that, because I found it a little clunky in these dev build ones compared to the one that's in Windows 11 currently.
And get Task Manager back as I used to. I don't know why they've taken that away.
Yeah.
Why can't I right click on the taskbar and get Task Manager?
Why? Oh, that is a pain. Yeah. I'll be glad I'm sure that'll come back at some point. But,
I do not care about widgets and things and the weather and temperature. Don't care. I want to be able to right click and get Task Manager so I can kill and also I want Task Manager to be as aggressive as it was back in the days of NT4, because right now it's a bit too nice and cuddly. It's too friendly. It should be the stone cold killer it used to be.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. It would cut through anything.
Exactly, it really did.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, we've got a couple, as well as our servicing pipeline. We also got an update that hit release preview and now is live, which is that power starting up.
Although they did increment the minor thing. This is build 22000651. Went to release preview, didn't it?
Yeah.
I think it was 652 that actually got released as a preview update. I think.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. So there's actually this is worthwhile having. There's an awful lot of fixes in this. So, I mean, for some, I think the the insider build did give a lot of information. They didn't actually call out anything in particular. The thing that caught my eye in this fix back on the 14th of April was the a fix that delayed the OS startup by approximately 40 minutes, which I hadn't encountered that myself, but that would have been maddening if that was happening to you.
I wouldn't have waited 40 minutes, that's for sure. I would have been trying to interrupt it and find out what's going on.
Yeah. So and there's a whole bunch of other things in there as well around race conditions that can cause a stop error during startup. You got problems with if an update happens, then you get thrown into BitLocker recovery. Again, they didn't give much of an indication as to how common these things were, and I suspect they're not that common because I think we'd have heard a lot more screaming if they were as common.
Yeah.
But it's good to know they're all being fixed. And then, of course, it popped up, and they did do a clarification regarding it. It turned up as 22,000.652 and KB5012643, and that came out as a recording. It came out last night, and they did actually they said that 40-minute issue was to do with point of sale terminals.
Yeah,
I can't imagine there's many retailers out there that are running Windows 11 in point of sale mode right now.
No, they're all XP embedded.
Well, exactly. Yeah. Well, the thing is, I mean, enterprises and and corporates, they're not going to. I mean, nobody would. I mean, obviously, you run a fleet as well, Ian. No one's going to put Windows 11 on their corporate machines right now. You're going to give it a few more months at least. You give the OS at least a year to bed in before you start to bang it out on your fleet. If you do at all, you may just simply use it when new hardware comes in that happens to have it installed.
Yeah,
that may be how it goes, because I mean, certainly the Windows 11 growth has definitely stalled. I think those who can upgrade have upgraded, and now we're down to just waiting for enterprises to make the move, and they won't do it until they buy a new kit.
They wait for Service Pack 1.
Yes. So this issue was clarified that it only affected point of sale terminals, and it was an occasional OS startup delay. So they put a lot more verbiage around it to say, actually it's very occasional and it's only point of sale, so you're not going to have a problem with it really. So, which I thought was quite fun. What annoyed me a little bit with that particular patch was they also listed their highlights, and one of the 4 highlights they chose to call out was display the temperature on top of the weather icon on the taskbar. Who cares?
You'd like that one. I thought they'd done that one for you.
Who cares when you've got fixes in here that Windows won't go into a BitLocker recovery after a servicing update? That's actually, I think that's more of a highlight. It's like, you know what, we fixed some really major problems here. Temperature on the weather, that's not major, that's cosmetic. Anyway, that's my rant done.
Yeah. So that was it for Windows Update. There was no build last week, so they said they'd be back with one early this week. Well, that's probably means tomorrow or Thursday. Tomorrow,
because they always do. Yeah, they always do on the day after recording every time.
Yes, they do. Yeah, on the Wednesday or Thursday. So I've got a feeling now, though, we're on a fairly gentle slope now of changes and things until we get to the end of July, August, before it goes to release preview September, October with the release.
Do you think
October.
We're almost at the point where they'll close the magic window where we can move from
yes.
sort of,
I think we get to this, next few weeks we may do, yeah. If this is like a good point, if you now is a really good time to evaluate which ring your builds are on, because I think that window will shut in next month, and they'll start. New stuff will go into dev and beta, and will be the 22H2, and then release preview will get it late summer with a release in sort of early autumn.
Yeah. Oh, hey, do you think early autumn is going to be the release where they finally remove the SMB1 binaries from Windows? Because I saw, I think Ned Pyle, he's more in the Windows server world. He blogged on the Microsoft site. I think, was it last week? I think that SMB1 was now in all versions of Windows, the Home Edition and Pro Edition as well. SMB1 was now disabled by default, and you had to actually choose to re-enable it. But going forwards in the coming months, they would actually remove the binaries. This is significant because SMB1 is probably how that very old NAS box that sat under your stairs talks to the network. There's lots of old kit that uses this file sharing, this file transfer, file sharing and transfer protocol. It's horrendously insecure. It's been the cause of so many hacks and things over the years. I know Microsoft's been trying for many years now to try and kill it off, but of course, if you kill it off in something like Windows, Windows Home or versions of Windows that people are likely to use with legacy hardware, then you'll cause all kinds of problems. It'll be a case of you'll get your new Windows 11 laptop and why can't I talk to my NAS box anymore? Because your NAS box doesn't support it. So, but I understand that the usage has pretty much fallen off a cliff in recent years. So, it's worthwhile being aware that if you are using older NAS type hardware or similar hardware, that might stop working pretty soon, especially if Microsoft does pull the binaries out of Windows, so you can't even enable it if you want to. You have to actually go and get an unsupported package, I think, to install manually, which could happen as soon as the Windows 11 update later on this year, I think.
Yeah.
Autumn.
Yeah, you're possibly right. Yeah, and I think it's unticked now, so you've got to go into the features and enable it. But if the binaries aren't there, then
although it's worth pointing out, if you've upgraded the system and that had it enabled, it will stay enabled.
Right. So it's only on new ones it's disabled
by default. And I think it's
by default.
It's if it's turned on. Oh, this is from memory, so please excuse me. I think if it's turned on, but there's no SMB1 actions happens for 15 days, I think it will automatically turn itself off. I think it's something like that. Yeah. Unless of course you're working in an enterprise and you're an administrator and you basically got it on as part of a policy, then that's fine, whatever. But if you're an ordinary user, if you don't use it, it's going to get itself turned off because Microsoft are very, very keen that this gets switched off. Which
will affect my Windows home server.
You know what? It might do actually. How old is Windows Home Server? Was Windows Home Server Windows 2000 Server 2003 under the hood?
The first one would have been. I wonder when the second one would have been the Vista. Well, that was 2003. Yeah, so it probably was 2003. I think there was one. There was one later one, wasn't there? That's a kind of a hybrid business type version of Home Server that came. Came later.
The answer to that is I'm not sure. I'd imagine that back then, yes, you would have had SMB1, but I imagine there's an upgrade path, even though Server 2003 is obviously not supported at all now. I think Server 2008 went out of support last year, the year before.
I think R2's out as well now.
Yeah, but there will be an upgrade. There'll be an upgrade path. It's more a case of if you've got relations or friends or things who might be using these things, get ready for the support calls.
Yeah, and I don't have a Windows Home Server anymore. Sadly, no
sad
more.
Days. Sad. Me neither. Sad days. It was good though, wasn't it, Bastard?
Oh, it was brilliant. Yeah, I enjoyed that. Yeah, I used to love my home server, but everything's in the cloud nowadays.
Yep.
Windows Live Mesh. Oh no, let's not go down that topic again. Now just a couple of bits to finish off. Did you see we talked HoloLens the other week, and it's all going very well in enterprise, but not so much for consumers. But do you see the stories that potentially the US government might have to ditch their HoloLens 2 investment?
Is this the military thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's. I mean, there's been rumblings.
I think that's more about politics, though, isn't it? Is it or technology?
Well, yeah, kind of. I mean, there's been rumblings. I mean, that there is. You're never quite sure with these deals, but there have been rumblings. I mean, I must admit, I was surprised when the deal was announced because having used a HoloLens, it's not the sort of device I can imagine being used in the battlefield. It doesn't have that robust strength. I mean, maybe there's a robust version that the military would use. But yes, this is a mutterings that I know it was delayed because it wasn't doing what the military wanted it to do, and the latest delays is they may be forced to kind of, was it half the order or something? Some huge cut. So yeah, safe to say it's not going well. I think that's but we do have Build coming up, and by the way, it's worth pointing out that anyone who wants to attend Build up, I think registration opened today, didn't it?
Yes, yeah, it did. Yeah, I've got your registrations in.
So
yeah, get them in quick.
Yeah,
There's a
definitely.
cap this year.
Is there a cap?
I believe so. I haven't had that confirmed, but someone who should know seemed to simply suggesting there was at some point they would stop taking registration.
Seems a bit artificial, seeing it's all virtual again. But
yeah.
Okay.
I guess there's cost in hosting stuff, though, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, if only Microsoft had access to a scalable cloud. I mean,
yeah.
What would that look like?
I may be wrong with that. It was just that someone who should know was saying that earlier today. So we'll see.
Okay. Well, it's entirely possible. It's. I mean, at some point they're going to have to, go hybrid anyway, and not fully virtual, as we discussed before.
Yeah.
So worthwhile getting build. And I wonder if we'll find out more in build as to what's happening with HoloLens, because it has, if there's going to be a HoloLens 3, I would think we should hear more about it at build. I don't know if we're going to or not, but I would hope we'd hear something.
Yeah, hoping so. I have to get my build registration. It's one of those things where, with it being online, it does give you the opportunity to go, even if you're not committed to spend the money, but you can still have a look at it and follow along or watch some of the things sort of and catch up as well.
Absolutely, yeah. It's very interesting. Of course, I think things are they on demand? Are they on demand this year? So you aren't so constrained by time zone. Is that how it's working this year?
I'm not sure. I think they would have been last year. I can't remember, to be honest.
I think last year did have it sort of different broadcasts at different times, so you can choose which time.
Yeah.
I don't know if they go on fully.
Yeah, I haven't registered yet, so we'll have to have a look. It's a good opportunity though for people that we mentioned before, but it is a good opportunity if you can't get to one of these events. It's too expensive. You can join online, then it means it's a level playing field a bit more, with developers with high profile jobs or companies to back them up.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's never been cheap to attend these events at all.
No. One other thing I did want to briefly mention is, because I think everybody's going to be talking about that, is how long are you going to be staying on Twitter for? When I ask you what your Twitter address is, are you going to start saying, well, you can follow me on Friendster or Friends Reunited or something like that?
Well, I'm a reporter, so I've got no choice. I have to stay there, and also then look at and try and work out where everyone's going to. But yes, oh, I can't talk about this. Garry, you talk about this one. I can't. It makes me too.
I can't talk about
it. Well, okay. This is obviously Twitter. That glorious place of supportive messages, and it's quite a good news source as well, I have to say. If you're able to batter your way through the untruths and the truths. Yes, it's been acquired for, was it $44 billion? I think. Elon Musk has decided to spend 44. I think is it the biggest tech acquisition in history? It must be close.
Pretty close, I would think.
Yes,
yeah.
I think it is. Yeah.
I mean, how much did IBM pay for Red Hat? That was in the 30s, I think. It's massive, really. So, yeah, it's worth pointing out. The offer was made a few weeks ago, a week or so ago, and initially was dismissed. And then I think Twitter's shareholder said, actually, this is not a bad price, really. And so Twitter's board then said, okay, we'll tentatively accept the offer. The deal hasn't closed yet, so it's still business as usual at the moment.
It's got to go through regulatory and all that stuff.
Exactly, all the things have got to happen. And it's a really odd move, I think, because. One, it's just a colossal amount of money, and it's. I don't know about you, but I've suddenly started thinking about MySpace and things. It's like the risk is that if you acquire this thing, but the people that are on it go elsewhere, that could end up making your investment be not worth what you thought you were paying for it. And $44 billion. I don't know. I don't want to sound like some dreadful hand wringer, but it's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money for something which hasn't made a lot of money.
Exactly. Interest payments alone is more than it makes an advert a year. It's just the whole thing is
it's something which has been share valued. Has always been valued on potential, and yet that potential has never been exploited. But, it's an interesting one. Right. But as you said, as he was muting out, there's a lot of people saying they're going to leave it because Elon's taken over. I also have to be really careful talking about Elon Musk in the EV, because being in the EV world, as soon as if you say anything negative about it, you tend to lose a million.
Yes.
So, but yeah, it's a very interesting move. I think I mean, I don't know which way it goes, but you just have to look at some of the other.
Oh, go on, Gary. Tell us what you think about the founders of Tesla. Go on.
Well, the founders are fine. They're very nice people. But yeah, I think that it's really interesting actually. If you look at how floundering a lot of the other platforms have been up to now, who've come along, and they've all hit the same problem, which is how do you balance that ability to publish anything you like with not being defamatory and not being in a way which is insulting or actually threatening to people. So it's really difficult. It's a really difficult one. And I don't know. I'm not sure he's going to have the answers as much as anybody else has had on social media platforms. But it's certainly a lot of money, and you can't have a feeling that might have been spent better. But there we go.
A lot of EV investment for that, couldn't you?
Yeah, you could. Yeah.
How much would 44 billion investment in chargers be?
Someone pointed out on Twitter on Twitter today. It's with some provisos. It's about $1 million per person in the United States.
Oh,
that's absolutely mad.
Yeah.
That's really no. How's measuring a bit? No, it can't be. I mean, are they doing? I said is a million? Is that how they're measuring a billion? It must be just that's whoa. I feel quite sick now.
So yeah. I mean, someone did challenge those figures, and he was saying, "Oh well, I'm not including retirement age, not including children, and all that sort of stuff." So, but yeah, I mean, it's certainly a lot of money per person.
It's insane. I mean, it's a lot of money per user. I mean, how many users has Twitter got?
Yeah,
maybe active users.
I actually don't know that figure.
I did know that. I can tell you actually because I wrote a piece about it not that long ago.
Over to our news desk.
Yeah, the last time I checked, I think it had about 200 million active users.
Yeah.
So you could work out how much 44 billion is paying for each of those users.
Yeah, and it's not money which has gone into Twitter. It's money that's gone to these former shareholders.
Yeah.
Who are probably laughing all the way to the bank, to be honest.
Well, they are because the stock price has gone down. So I think he's now paying over the odds, isn't he?
Yeah, and also, I mean, it's had a dramatic effect on Tesla's price as well because he's based it on the margins on Tesla. So it's an interesting one. But yeah.
I mean, I did see someone saying if only he'd bought MySpace, he could have called it MySpaceX.
Oh, that's good. That is good. Yeah.
Yeah. Well.
Yes, not mine. I saw that on Twitter. Yeah. I can't recall whose tweet it was, but thank you for the joke.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? I see these stories about people say, "Well, that's it. I'm going to be off Twitter." Yeah. And so as I'm seeing all these things as I scroll through TweetDeck. Yeah. So yeah, we're not going to just be jumping off the platform straight away. That's the thing. No. I find it very, and I think it's like anything. If you make sure the people you follow is a well created list, then you actually get quite, you can be quite good. Although it's just in the early days it was completely tech news, and now it's other stuff as well. But it's just what it is. You've just got to adapt with it, and we like it for what it is. I like I still like my RSS feeds and things like that, but you just got. That's where the news is on these type of services like Twitter.
Well, it's I mean, as a reporter, I use a combination of RSS feeds, Twitter, and obviously mail, and just
Yeah, it's a combination of everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Twitter is normally where you, but then of course you be very careful to work out what's real and what's not real, because that has definitely got a lot harder to work out in recent years. Working out, okay, this thing's on Twitter, and then you have to spend the next few hours fact checking it. And I know some websites just gamble, and we'll just go for it. But you do have to fact check to make sure, because you just can't trust what's on there is always real.
No, absolutely, that's true. Anyway, so talking of bailing on platforms, Garry, where can we find you and your EV trials and tribulations? He's gone silent.
Gary's gone. He's been silenced.
He's been silenced, yeah.
See, he said it would happen. He mentioned Elon Musk, and that was it. He's been silenced now.
He's gone. Yeah. Well, Richard, where can we find you if you
well, Telegram, Signal, Twitter, obviously, @Richard_Speed.
Oh, and Garry has disappeared. Oh, there he is. We thought you'd been taken out by the Tesla EV Owners Club.
Yes, someone took me out.
Yeah.
Anyway.
This is Garry. I'm calling from the trunk of a Model S, speeding down the M1.
Let me out.
Oh, it's okay for that charge.
Actually, I was in the trunk or the front of a Model S, I'll be fine because there's a release handle. Which is an interesting fact. I mean, one of the strange facts I found out the other week is my car has got a fairly small trunk on it of fruit in the UK, but if you get the rear-wheel drive version of my car in the UK, you get a much bigger front. In the States, you don't. Because they kept with the small frunk, because that way it was too small to put a person in, so they didn't have to put a release handle in to let we'd been no good. But that's interesting stuff.
That ruins loads of films for me if there's release handles in these things. So half the films I watch, because someone gets stuck in the back of one of them, and then you have to escape by smashing the lights out.
Well, exactly. There's two things that have ruined films. One is that, and the other thing is mobile phones.
Yeah. Well, yeah. If you watch any old films or any old sitcoms, just about every scenario, especially sitcoms, gets ruined by mobile phones. Like many things, technology is destroyed. Go back to your Spectrum. We'll be happy with that.
Exactly. ZX Spectrum, magnificent vehicle. C5 was a great vehicle.
Yes, the original EV.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
At this time, although I think. I think Crispin Sinclair was saying the range was, shall we say, when Sir Clive calculated the range, he didn't calculate it entirely under real-world conditions.
Well, I suggest that anybody's interested in that era has a look for the Micro Men dramatised story of that era.
The drama, what's it called? The docudrama.
Yes, definitely worth it. And the C5 gets a mention in that as well. But a fantastically amusing drama about that period of time with BBC micros and spectrums. And
what was interesting actually about the chat in the museum was Crispin Sinclair said he thought it was great. Micro, he said brilliant. He said, but his brother thought it was awful, hated it. And Sir Clive, he said, never actually watched it as far as he knows. So.
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed them, so I think I'm going to go and dig those out.
I'd recommend it. It's a brilliant drama.
Oh yeah, absolutely loved it. In fact, if you go on the Centre for Computing History's website, they have a YouTube watch along with I think it's Chris.
Would it be Chris Curry and
yes,
Herman.
Yes. Hauser.
Yeah,
from Acorn. So yeah, they get their impressions as it was going on as well. So yeah, definitely check that out. Right, well that's just about all we've got time for this week. We'll be back same time, same place next week. You can email me Ian@ThisLifestyle or @IceDixon on Twitter. We'll see you next week.
Cheerio.